Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most credible voice in true crime. So it's been a day since I posted the hashtag 2 years ago today CW episode 13 on Nut Gate. As expected, it's garnered quite a lot of responses and quite a lot of emotions. I wanted to sort of give it a day or so for people to just absorb what was in that video. It is quite a long one, 111 minutes. The next 3 episodes are actually quite short. So the one would be for yesterday, the 10th of July, and then today, which would be 2 years ago today, and then I'm also going to do tomorrow's episode in this episode. So episode 14 is essentially 3 episodes in one, basically because it's a short episode, and also because I want to deal with the Vincent van Gogh story with some emphasis as well. 130 years ago, yesterday, the 10th of July, he wrote a really important letter referring to 2 very important paintings, and I'll talk about that on camera in the episode 130 years ago today, Van Gogh dealing with the wheat fields with crows episode. So look out for that. It's about 40 minutes long. Before we get to today's 3 days that I'm dealing with, if you haven't subscribed yet to this channel, please do. Please like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. So as per usual, I'll be referring in this episode to 3 posts on crimerocket2.com dealing with July 10th, 11th and 12th. So let's start with July 10th, which is the Nut Gate aftermath. So if you think about Nut Gate as this sort of explosion, what happened afterwards? Well, it's unlikely what's new about Shan'ann ranting about his folks on social media on the day she posted them. First of all, she didn't post it on her timeline. I don't know if she necessarily wanted him to see it, or whether she necessarily wanted them to see it. I do think they did see it, but I don't think he saw it in the immediate aftermath. From the phone data review, Watts only appears to be aware of it 3 days later, on July 13th and 14th, when he atypically logs onto Facebook. So I want to emphasize this. Shan'ann is logging onto Facebook around the clock all the time, so you can't really read much into that. But for Chris Watts, he's not on Facebook, he's not interested in Facebook, but for some reason on July 13th and July 14th, he's directed to go to Facebook to look at something. And what else could it be except Nutgate, which happened 3 to 4 days earlier? Isn't he looking at that and thinking about what is being said about his parents? Fuck you, and they'll never see my children again, and all that kind of thing. Now bear in mind, it's quite different for Shan'ann to be saying that kind of stuff to him. It's a completely different story to have his parents, and there's even a kind of a smudgy picture of his father in the background in one of those rant photos, right? It's quite a different kettle of fish when you're having your parents demean, whether rightly or wrongly, to other people in public. So I think, to put it mildly, that Nutgate made an impression on Chris Watts. He registered what was going on within the affair. And I think seeds germinated as a result of that. 24 hours after Nutgate, Shan'ann is surprised her husband is quiet and distant. Watts admits to being short to her, but he tells her he still loves her. So Watts is now getting quite sort of used to bullshitting Shan'ann, despite his feelings probably penduluming to an extreme. So despite him feeling more and more strongly about something, he's still being deceitful, and it's just coming naturally to him to lie. And people might say, why the hell did Watts take the polygraph? Why the hell did Watts lie to the cops? Why the hell did Watts try to fool Coda and Tammy Lee? Well, the answer is he'd been lying to Shan'ann all along. He'd been lying to his mistress, so he felt like he'd fooled them, he could fool the cops. I mean, it's a little bit different though. When it's matters of the heart, it's much harder to discern reality than in something like true crime. I'm talking about if you are involved in it yourself. But to go to the actual phone data review for July 10th, there's no message this time in the morning. So Shan'ann kind of lets him go, lets him sort of, have his time. And then quite late in the afternoon, she calls Watts and they have an 8-minute conversation. She calls him. He doesn't call her to say, how are you doing? Our child almost died. I'm so angry with my parents. Are you okay? Shanann's got to call him. And after the call, she texts him. So around about 2 hours after the call, 2 hours, 10 minutes, Shan'ann texts Watts a couple of follow-up messages and she says, are you okay? It's like you don't want to talk. I kept trying to talk and I had to dig it out of you. And this seems to be a reference to the 8-minute conversation. So in that call, Shan'ann talks to him and he doesn't really say anything to her. And this is the beginning of what's becoming standoffish. He's starting to make up his mind about Shan'ann, but also about Kessinger, and also about himself, about his position. He's starting to gravitate not a little bit away from Shan'ann, but a lot. He's also starting to move not a little away from his own family, but a lot. And he's probably feeling very strongly now that he doesn't want this unborn child. He doesn't want to be entangled in that, to use a word Jada Pinkett Smith used recently as well. She says, Watts replies, I'm fine, baby. The last few days at work have put a lot of responsibility on me with new people. I didn't mean to seem short, boo. I love you to the moon and back. And then there's like a heart emoticon. So there again, Watts is saying exactly what he thinks she wants to hear. And he is also dipping a little bit into the narrative of reality, because he does have a lot of responsibility on him with new people in terms of work. He's got to make sure that he conducts this affair in a way that he doesn't get into trouble, not only with his wife, but I guess co-workers. Bear in mind it's now escalated to a full-blown affair. They, having sex regularly, but they're both trying to keep it a secret, obviously from people that know them, but probably from their co-workers as well. So when they're in the office, they probably got to skulk around and make sure no one's in the corridors and all that kind of thing. Where Watts says, I didn't mean to seem short, boo. That's true as well. He didn't mean to seem short. He was being short. Why? Because at the time that Shan'ann called him, he was probably either on his way to Kessinger or preparing to go to Kessinger or already there. It's possible that he was already there. And so he doesn't have much to say to Shan'ann. He has a lot to say to Kessinger. He has a lot to do with her. And so he doesn't really want to be... He's trying to deal with Shan'ann to the minimum that she's going to get off his back so that he can do other things. And so he's saying the kinds of things that's going to allow him to do that. And he is... giving her the kind of feedback that is going to, he hopes, reassure her. And so he says, I love you to the moon and back. And Shan'ann is probably getting confused here. Is he just being an introvert? Is he tired? Whatever. And she maybe wants to allow the moment to pass, kind of thing. Although she does say, she responds at that time, I miss you and I feel like you just want to work out and run. So she's saying, they're kind of not even talking about Nut Gate here. They're sort of saying, well, Shan'ann's saying, you don't seem to want to talk to me. You seem to be doing other things. You are busy with other things. And Watts says, well, I've got a lot of responsibility at work the last few days, which is kind of true. And when Shan'ann says, you just want to work out and run, that is giving us an idea of what he's saying to her whenever she communicates with him. So he might say, maybe if she called him at 5:20, maybe he said, I got to go. I need to get in my workout before the sun sets. Or I'm running with Nicholas or Nick Thayer. I've got to go. And so maybe that is his sort of plausible reason for ending conversations with her when it's actually something else. He went on, so he's talking about why running is so important to him. He went on to say, running helps clear my head. It's a way to free it all. Now that is also revealing something about Watts's mentality. Like I say, he's actually revealing truths within the deception. So the truth he's revealing is he's saying he wants to clear his head, right? What does he mean by that? Like, what does he mean when he says clear his head? We'll get to that in a second. Then he says it's a way to free it all. What does he mean by that? And the fact is he does want to get free. He's thinking about it here already. He's thinking about, I want to be free. It's not a case that he is free in terms of Shan'ann is in North Carolina. He wants to be free permanently. He wants to be free not in a temporary basis, but in a kind of fundamental way. And he doesn't just say it's a way to be free. He says to free it all. He wants to be free of all of it. And it probably means the children as well, and the debt situation as well, and the family situation as well. And to her credit, Shan'ann didn't buy the excuse. She said, I wish my husband wanted to talk to me. So Shan'ann is actually onto him, because her husband doesn't want to talk to her. Her husband doesn't want to have a child with her. Her husband doesn't want to be married to her. And so this little symptom of him not wanting to talk to her is kind of a big deal. But Watts is trying to kind of assure her that this dedication to fitness is really the reason why he doesn't want to talk to her or can't talk to her. That's really what's going on. And it's not the real reason. It's Kessinger. So when Watts tells Shan'ann he wants to clear his head, what he's really saying, if only to himself, is he wants to clear his head of her. And a month later, he succeeded. So I'm going to put up a couple of images from Shan'ann's Facebook from July 11th, and you can kind of see what face she was presenting to the world that day. She kind of looks quite happy. She kind of looks like Nut Gate hasn't happened, just based on those images. So let's now go into July 11th. Shan'ann is still doing all the calling, typically first thing in the morning before Watts goes to work, although she didn't the day before, and in the afternoon shortly after he arrives back. Where is Watts when he receives these calls? At home or with Kessinger? So on July 11th at 2018, at 5:20, Shan'ann called Watts and held a 7-minute conversation. Now bear in mind, he probably can't talk to her too much when he's at the well site or when he's on the road in his truck. So she kind of feels like she's got to call him just before he goes to work, right? Now 5:20 is 2 minutes after Watts appeared in the driveway when on the morning of the murders. So that's right on schedule. 16:20 is probably when he should have arrived home by then. And Shan'ann calls and they have a 13-minute conversation. Now, on the one hand, you might say, 13 minutes in the afternoon and 7 minutes in the morning for a total of 20 minutes. You might say that's not a long time. But I think you've got to bear in mind Watts is probably not saying much. Watts doesn't want to say much. Watts doesn't want to talk to Shan'ann. So a 20-minute conversation with someone who doesn't say much and doesn't want to talk to you is pretty long. You could almost double it for the actual time if that person was responding in a normal situation. Does that make sense? So this also raised the question, if his GPS rigged work truck was always parked at home, Watts probably drove to Kessinger in the Lexus early in the afternoon after work and at the crack of dawn before work. her home and his were close to each other, and his was on the way to work coming from Kessinger's home. Does it make sense? So because of them living relatively close to each other, he could arrive home, go to her house in Shan'ann's car or in the Lexus, and then come back in the Lexus kind of on the way to work. And it wouldn't add too much time to the commute anyway. As I mentioned earlier, this could also explain why the garage sensor was, quote, intentionally broken. All those trips to the garage door weren't just him going to work, it was him returning the Lexus. And it was important that Shan'ann didn't figure that out. Why are you taking the Lexus out at night and bringing it home in the morning? So it was important Shan'ann didn't know that. One also wonders whether Shan'ann is still concerned about the Vivint sensor, or whether that has been supplanted by Nut Gate and also what's seeming to be a little bit quiet. Meanwhile, Shan'ann's social media, as I mentioned around the same time, is all smiles and positivity. Based on her talking about tears of anger, now she's suddenly fine. She while she's hating on Watts' folks, she loves her energy, mood support, patience, and just feeling great. Now, I don't want to be ugly to Shan'ann, but you could potentially argue against Thrive and say, if Thrive was so effective, wouldn't it have given her mood support during Nut Gate? I'm talking about preventing Nut Gate from actually happening. In her post, she talks about being on her A game, clearly wearing her patches during the pregnancy and doing the Thrive themed pregnancy spiel. Her first trimester, she writes, is ideal, and she's off to color her hair. This is what I mean by, if Shan'ann wasn't thinking in this mindset of trying to sell happiness, trying to sell a fairy tale to her fellow Thrivers, and she instead was spending a little bit more time thinking about Watts' behavior, couldn't she have kind of cottoned on to him a bit earlier? This isn't an attack on Shan'ann, it is to say, in a criminal scenario, whatever we are being distracted by distracts us from signals and keys and flags and things that we would otherwise notice and should otherwise notice. And the fact is, Shan'ann has noticed something is up with Watts, but she's also letting it go whenever she posts something onto Facebook. She says, it's already been one crazy busy week already. Stressful yet amazing. Had so much fun with parents and kids today. She's obviously talking about her parents. Now they are swimming with Pop-Pop. I love having the energy, mood support, patience, and just feeling great. Thrive allows me to create so many memories with my kids. As a mom, we have to be on our A game. I definitely am these days. So I don't know whether it's possible to give a more glowing endorsement for herself, to say everything is going great, I'm having a wonderful pregnancy, than what you just heard there. On July 11th, she posted another image of herself in a vehicle, and she says, I should be worn out from this heat and running around, especially first trimester, going home to color hair now. So in that, she's also kind of saying, I should be worn down, I should be beaten down, but I'm fine. Thrive makes me feel fine. And that is a kind of a weird way of looking into Shan'ann's psychology. Is I think she was feeling worn out. I know she did post a private photo of herself to her friends showing how she looked, but I think that was in August, the first week of August. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong. Of course, that wasn't posted onto Facebook. But another question to ask is, was Nicole Kessinger really not reading these posts on Watts' wife's public profile? And wouldn't Lavelle have been concerned about one of their promoters using her social media to go nuclear on her own family, like she had on July 9th? Wouldn't that be breaking their kind of code of conduct? Now, I want to address something that I'm not sure too many people have thought about, which is, when is Nicole Kessinger supposed to spy on Shan'ann when Chris Watts was spending every night at her home? Not just one night or another night, but for weeks on end. So when is she supposed to kind of spy on Shan'ann's Facebook when the husband is with her the whole time? And then you might say, well, she could do it at work. Well, she's at work. You know, some work scenarios prevent you from accessing Facebook. I don't know whether anyone listening to this video worked at Anadarko. I don't know whether Anadarko had a policy against accessing Facebook while you're at the office. I know many corporates do have that policy. Also know many corporates had that policy and then they changed it. When I worked at a media company, it was, I think, taken away. It was allowed, then it was taken away, and then it was brought back. And my argument was, you can't be a media company and be divorced from social media. Not only that, you need to market yourself on social media. And of course, a lot of the old school editors didn't know what social media meant. They felt it was a threat to the industry. And some of them took a really long time to sort of let social media in the door. And I think those that allowed their stories to be shared did somewhat better. But on the other hand, then the story gets discussed on social media, not on your platform. So it was a bit of a difficult thing. The question is, I don't know if it's people think it is so obvious that Kessinger would have been sort of studying Shan'ann's Facebook. And I'm not saying she never did. I'm just saying, when would she have the opportunity if Watts was always with her after work? And one could say, well, when he went to fetch his vehicle, that would be a chance. And we know that she did do it, but it seems from the phone data review to have been possibly relatively infrequently. Does that make sense? I'm not making the case either way. I'm just saying it's something maybe worth thinking about. I mean, do you look at someone's social media when they're with you in the room? And do you, if it's kind of a new thing, if it's kind of a new situation? Okay, now we deal with July 12th, which would be tomorrow. 2 years ago, tomorrow, Chris Watts. And Shan'ann calls Watts at the crack of dawn on July 12th, which is a Thursday. So all the other days that I've mentioned are days of the week following Nut Gate. So Nut Gate happened on a Monday, right? I think the Watts in-laws actually took off work in order to be home for their grandchildren, something like that. In any event, so the aftermath to Nut Gate was Tuesday, Wednesday, and this day, Thursday. Days of the week, days that Watts had to go to work, days that he would spend the night with Kessinger. Shan'ann calls him twice on Thursday. Both times he doesn't answer. That's in the morning. Watts was almost certainly in Kessinger's bed at the time, which is why he didn't answer. Half an hour later he calls her back. So half an hour later he was probably on his way home, in other words, to Saratoga Trail, and with the coast clear with Kessinger not next to him, he calls her back. Now, I think the other thing that is important to bear in mind here is previously I think Watts did call Shan'ann while Kessinger was around. In other words, he was at Kessinger on July 4th when he took a call from Shan'ann, or he spoke to Shan'ann with Kessinger sort of hovering over his shoulder. And that led to a massive argument that day on July 4th. So Watts has now learned, don't answer the phone when you're with Kessinger, or don't talk to Shan'ann when you're with Kessinger, or don't text Shan'ann when you're with Kessinger, or try not to. On the other hand, when he was in North Carolina, he did all of those things, presumably, especially texting, while with Shan'ann. So I think that was a way that Kessinger also felt like she wasn't being second. The fact that Watts was in constant contact with her, and I think she wanted him to be, and I think he wanted to be as well. But I also think he felt obligated and that he was kind of on a leash. He had to prove that he wasn't being tempted back into being a family man, if that makes sense. And then they didn't speak again for the rest of the day. This is day 3 after Nut Gate. We know that Shan'ann ordered her husband not to communicate with his parents as payback for Nut Gate, something that weighed on him weeks later. So just to go into the phone data review for July 12th, Shan'ann made 2 unanswered calls. That's really early in the morning at 4:45. And then at 5:15, Watts called Shan'ann and held a 10-minute conversation. Again, this is 2 minutes before the Trinastich video shows Watts moving the car up onto the driveway. So that tended to be the time, I think, that Watts would, be ready to go to work, I guess. So I'll be back on the 13th or 14th to deal with both those days, which are Friday and Saturday, from a year ago on those days in the Chris Watts story. So look out for that. It'll be 2 or 3 days from today, which will give people a chance to absorb this particular episode. If you haven't subscribed, please do like, share, leave a comment. Look out for a very interesting episode narrating a letter Vincent van Gogh wrote today dealing with a crisis, and this is around about 18 days before he died. And the question is, did he die from suicide or was he murdered? And that is something I've also written a book about, and something that we are going to address also in the next couple of days, dealing with hashtag 130 years ago today, Van Gogh. As I say, this is an on-camera presentation or on-camera episode that I do, and so you can check that out if you haven't already, and look forward to hearing your comments on that. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.